Hello there. It's nice to share this quiet with you. Let the room dim and the breath soften, in and out, steady and light, like ripples on a sleepy lake. Tonight, we'll keep company with a gentle companion that rarely asks for credit, inertia. It is the calm habit of things, to keep going as they are, to rest where they rest, to glide where they glide. You feel it when a car keeps rolling after your foot leaves the gas, when a rocking chair sways a little longer, when planets coast along their patient paths without hurry. We will drift from bedside to galaxies, from the weight of a mug settling in your hand, to the way a spacecraft keeps faith with its course long after the engines are quiet. No rush, only a soft voice in a long, easy night. If this brings you ease, a simple like and a gentle subscribe. Help others find this calm place only when it feels right. For now, let your shoulders loosen, let the thoughts thin out, and let the quiet momentum of the world carry you toward rest. Picture a quiet room at night, a smooth wooden table, and a coin sleeping in the middle of it. The air is still. The coin does nothing in particular. It simply continues being what it already is, a small circle of metal resting in place. You could watch it with patient eyes and nothing would change. No hurry, no drama. Not because the coin is stubborn, but because the world is consistent. That calm is inertia, the tendency of things to keep their current story until something asks them to tell a different one. Give the coin a light touch with your fingertip. It glides over the varnish in a straight path, quiet and sure. A moment ago it was devoted to rest. Now it is devoted to motion. The same rule supports both scenes. Left alone, motion would carry on forever with the same speed and the same direction. We do not see that forever because the table is not perfectly smooth and the air gently rubs. Those are forces too, only very small ones, and they whisper the coin back to rest. A simple sentence holds this together. An object at rest stays at rest. An object in motion stays in motion with constant velocity. Both are true unless a force acts. Newton wrote it down with clean clarity. Others sensed it earlier. Sailors watched ships slip on open water long after the oars were lifted. Children learned it from skates on winter ice. The rule feels obvious once named, the way a lullaby feels like something you always knew as a child. Before that clarity, people tried other stories. In Aristotle's time, motion felt like a question about purpose. Things sought their natural places. Earth and water wanted down. Air and fire wanted up. The sky kept a separate set of manners, perfect and circular. To keep moving, Aristotle thought, a thing needed help, as if every cart wanted a constant pull. Every arrow needed the air pushing from behind. Without the language of friction or momentum, that guess did not sound foolish. Push a cart on a rough road and it stops when you stop. On that kind of surface, friction is the loudest voice in the room. Centuries later, Galileo cleared some of the fog. He rolled balls on smooth ramps and noticed a pattern. If a ball climbed toward its original height on a second ramp, then on a perfectly level surface it should keep rolling without slowing at all. Friction is what steals speed. A bump is what changes direction. The better the polish, the longer the glide. His thought was simple and kind. Remove the causes of change and motion quietly preserves itself. From there, Newton gave the habit of the world a full vocabulary. Mass became more than weight. It became a measure of inertia, a way to say how committed an object is to its current state. A heavy door is polite but reluctant. It resists starting to move. It resists stopping once it is moving. A feather yields to any small breath. This is not preference, it is property. The number that says how much of something there is also says how strongly it holds to its present rhythm. You meet this law whenever you ride in a car. The light turns red, the brake settles under a calm foot, the car slows. Your body does not want to. It keeps going with the speed you had a heartbeat earlier. A seatbelt provides the gentle, decisive force that brings you back into agreement with the car. Without it, your body would try to keep its path, and the dashboard would supply the force in a much harsher voice. On a bus, a bag tips over when the driver pulls away because the bag is keeping its old story of rest while the bus writes a new one of forward motion. The coffee in your hand swells toward the rim during a sharp turn. The cup turns. The liquid continues in a straight line until the ceramic curves its path. Far from sidewalks and traffic lights, the same rule becomes almost pure. Space offers so little resistance that motion behaves as if nothing could interrupt it. A spacecraft finishes its burn, and the engines fall quiet. The craft does not slow. It follows the path its speed and direction define. If that path threads a steady curve around a planet, we call it an orbit, but the habit is the same. The craft keeps going. Gravity is not a rope that drags it down. Gravity draws a curve in the map, a constant sideways tug that bends straight lines into circles and ellipses. The motion is still a kind of straightness, only straightness written on a curved page. This is why satellites can circle for years with tiny corrections. Above the drag of thick air, almost nothing rubs them. Their forward motion and the planet's pull find a balance that looks like falling forever without getting any closer to the ground. The International Space Station circles Earth about once every 90 minutes. The crew experiences weightlessness, not because gravity has vanished, but because the station and everyone in it are constantly falling together. Inertia writes the forward part of the path. Gravity writes the curve. The two hand each other the pen, and the circle continues. Look again at the table coin and notice another quiet detail. Inertia does not prefer any direction. It holds to whatever path is already there. Right or left does not matter. Fast or slow does not matter. Rest or motion does not carry moral weight. Inertia is tolerant and patient. It keeps things as they are until change arrives through a force. That neutrality allows the world to be predictable. A train pulls its cars because the engine provides a steady pull. The cars follow because they accept the story of motion they were already telling. When a change does come, it comes as a force. Some are familiar. Friction is the grip between surfaces, 1,000 tiny hooks meeting and letting go in rapid sequence. Air resistance is the soft push of molecules piling up in front of a moving object and swirling behind it. Gravity is the attraction between masses, subtle when two pebbles meet, commanding when a planet is involved. Some forces are designed. A brake squeezes a spinning disk and converts motion into warmth. A parachute opens and asks the air to help. Each force writes a new line over inertia's steady baseline. If the world were perfectly quiet, with no forces at all, a thrown ball would never arc downward. It would keep its straight path forever. That world is not ours. Our world has air, ground, texture, heat, and the gentle clutter of daily life. We still glimpse the pure rule whenever we reduce the noise. Ice with a thin melt on top. A polished floor with felt socks. A puck on an air table, floating on a cushion that removes almost all friction. The glide lasts longer. The straightness holds more faithfully. the law shows its face. There is an old scene that people remember with a small smile. During a moonwalk, an astronaut dropped a hammer and a feather at the same time. On the moon, there is no thick air to lift the feather, no soft cushion to slow it. The two fell side by side to the dust. It was simple and beautiful. Heavy and light objects shared the same pull and the same resistance, which is to say, almost none. The difference we see on Earth comes mostly from the air, not from the object's wishes. That demonstration was not a rebuke to Aristotle, so much as a kindness to a long effort at understanding. With new conditions and better tools, the pattern became clearer. You can carry the idea into your kitchen. A rolling pin keeps going until the dough pushes back. A cabinet door swings a bit longer if the hinges are well oiled. A broom swept with a quick start feels heavier at the first push and at the final stop. That feeling is your muscles meeting inertia, paying the small price to change what already is. On a bike, the wheel's spin stores motion. Slowing down requires a gentle squeeze on the brakes, heat growing in the pads as motion turns into warmth. The exchange is honest. Nothing is lost without a reason. Even when we step into the language of physics more boldly, the tone can remain soft. Momentum is the measure of motion that combines speed and mass. It is the how much of movement. A small pebble moving fast and a large stone moving slowly can share the same momentum in spirit. When something changes that number, a force has acted for a stretch of time. That is all impulse means, a force applied for a moment. These words are just names for the patterns you already feel in your bones. Inertia also explains a familiar awkwardness with balance. A bicycle that is moving is easier to keep upright than one that is barely creeping along. Part of that comfort comes from the wheels behaving like gyroscopes, part from the quick corrections your body can make while you are in motion. In stillness, there is less time for small steering choices to save the posture. The same rule hides under bowling pins that scatter in a pleasing clatter. Each pin at rest prefers rest. The incoming ball gives it a forceful reason to choose a new path, and the pile writes a brief, chaotic poem of momentum, shared and lost and found again. It helps to notice that inertia belongs not only to things that slide or spin, it belongs to every part of your body that chooses to keep its state. When an elevator starts upward, your stomach lingers in the old story for an instant. When a swing pauses at its highest point, your body prepares to follow the path it held a second earlier. The world is not trying to surprise you. It is keeping its promise. Only a new force makes a new line. Sometimes people say inertia as if it were a force, like a curse of laziness. It is not a push. It is a lack of push. It is the faithful continuation of whatever is happening until something acts. That may seem like a small distinction, but it matters. Inertia does not cause motion. It preserves it. Gravity causes the arc. Friction causes the slow fade. A motor causes the pull. Inertia keeps the page as it is until the ink of a force touches it. There's a quiet philosophy tucked inside. Rest does not require an explanation. Motion does not either. Both are natural. Change asks for a reason, and in physics, that reason is force. The world's patience is not indifference. It is reliability. Because the rule holds, we can plan. A plane needs engines, not to stay in motion, but to overcome the constant baptisms of air resistance and gravity. A satellite needs small puffs of propellant not to keep going, but to trim the tiny drags and tugs that accumulate. A grocery bag in the back seat needs a strap because it will continue forward when the car stops. None of this is mischief. It is consistency. Think of the moon. It circles Earth month by month. Nothing pushes it along. It has its forward motion, written into it by long ago events, and Earth's gravity bends that motion into a looping fall. The same pattern scales to planets around the sun and to stars in a galaxy's wide arm. In the dark between stars, where there is almost no gas to rub against, momentum is king. A small nudge during a flyby can set a probe on a path that lasts decades. Voyager still travels on the gift of old burns and gravity assists, crossing a frontier the sun's wind no longer owns. Engines quiet. Motion continues. The rule is gentle and relentless. Even on Earth, we make room for the habit of things. Trains need long distances to slow because their mass is large, and the contact between smooth steel wheels and smooth rail offers little help in stealing speed. Skaters at a rink drift long after a push. Furniture sliders make a heavy couch seem to float across a floor. We do not abolish inertia. We work with it. We let it share the load. Then we ask friction or brakes or cushions to finish the sentence. There is a human comfort in this too. The body at rest tends to stay at rest. It is not a failure to feel that truth late at night when the couch holds you or when the bed seems to have its own gravity. It is a biological echo of physics. Muscles relax. Heartbeats find a slower drum. Breath moves with less effort. When you do get up, you provide the needed force, a small kindness to yourself that turns stillness into motion again. Once you see the pattern, you begin to notice that much of life is built to guide forces gently rather than fight inertia head-on. The rounded corners of a highway ramp invite a car to change direction gradually. The broad wings of a bird give the air time to push. A child's sled follows the slope it is given. Even the design of a teacup rim asks a splash to roll back into the cup instead of spilling. The world is full of small negotiations between motion and the whispers that steer it. Aristotle's picture of purpose still holds a certain charm. It is not true physics, but it reminds us that our first explanations often come dressed as stories. Over time, we trade them for cleaner, simpler sentences. The story that remains is kinder than it looks. Inertia tells us that nature is not fickle. It will not change its mind without a reason. Give an object a calm environment, and it will honor its present state. Give it a reason, and it will change in a way that fits the reason. That is all the law says, and it is enough to support ships and satellites, swings and skates, coins and cups, and the steady curve of a moonlit tide. If your eyes feel heavier now, that is a kind of motion too, only inwards. The day's momentum is slowing. The mind is easing its speed. No need to force anything. The same rule that keeps a coin at rest is happy to keep a person at rest as well. A pillow helps. A blanket helps. The rhythm of breath helps most of all. In the quiet, the unseen habit of the world shows its most generous face, and everything that does not need to change can simply stay as it is for a while. Think of how that kindness meets an older way of seeing. To Aristotle, water did not simply fall. It was returning to its place, like a traveler finding the right street and the window with a familiar light. In that picture, the world wore a quiet personality, as if rocks and rivers held their own small preferences. It is not science in the modern sense, yet there is an easy comfort in imagining motion with a purpose. Even so, patient eyes could see the seams, watch a stone roll across the ground. In Aristotle's telling, It would stop the instant your hands stopped pushing. In the world we touch, it slides a little farther, then comes to rest because the earth is rough and the air pulls at it. The push did not vanish. It was met and, little by little, overcome by other small forces that were always there, waiting their turn. Earth hides the simple truth behind a constant drizzle of interference. Friction lives at every contact. Air presses on every surface. Nothing here moves without whispering to something else, so it is easy to believe that motion needs constant help. Without a way to strip those influences away, early observers could not see the cleaner pattern beneath. For a long time, tradition held the door shut as well. Universities taught Aristotle as if the syllabus were carved into the sky itself. Questioning him often meant questioning the way learning was organized, yet measurements grew steadier and lenses grew clearer, and the heavens began to argue back. The celestial spheres did not behave like perfect clockwork. The planets wandered in ways that did not match the old charts. Arrows did not need a wind at their backs to continue their path. Stones rolled farther on smoother ground. Slowly, the world began to sound less like a stage play and more like a set of patient rules. It is fair to be kind here. Aristotle was not waving a wand. He was reasoning with the materials he had, trying to replace myth with order. Even when he missed the mark, he lit the path for others, who either built on the scaffolding or rebuilt it from the ground. Science is less of a monument and more of a long walk by lantern, each idea throwing light a few steps ahead. By that light, even a misunderstanding can be part of the forward motion. Ideas move too. They gather speed, meet resistance, shape themselves around obstacles, and sometimes travel far beyond where the first hand aimed them. In that sense, the long story of inertia begins with a philosopher who misread it and still managed to set the ball going. Then came a careful listener to motion. Galileo liked to let gravity speak in slow syllables. He did not settle for what felt reasonable. He asked the floor to tell the truth. To tame the rush of falling, he built inclined planes, wooden sentences tilted just enough that a rolling sphere would stretch its journey into seconds he could follow with a water clock or the swing of a pendulum. With those simple tools, he found a pattern that felt like a secret made obvious. When a ball rolls down a slope and up a second one, it tries to climb back to the same height it started from. Make the second slope gentler, and the ball travels farther to reach that height. Make it gentler still, and it travels farther still. Imagine the second slope gradually flattening until it becomes a level table. The ball, left alone in such a world, would never reach the old height because there is no uphill to climb. It would keep going, not because something pushes it, but because nothing stops it. This sounds familiar because it is the seed of what we now call inertia. Motion does not need a cause to continue. It needs a cause to begin, and it needs a cause to change. The world had been blaming the lack of a push. Galileo pointed at friction instead. Friction is the quiet thief that makes skates slow and socks stop and marbles rest before the doorway. It lives in the tiny ridges of surfaces, in the microscopic hills and valleys that catch and release as two materials slide past each other. Air resistance joins in as a softer cousin, piling up ahead of a moving object and curling behind it, trading speed for warmth in thousands of little collisions. Together, they trick the eye into believing that motion wants to fade. Reduce those interferences even a little, and the true habit of movement peeks through. Galileo could not banish friction or empty the air from the room, but he could polish wood and smooth metal and choose gentle slopes. The flatter the track, the longer the glide, the cleaner the bearing, the truer the line. He had no lasers, no electronic timers, no vacuum chambers. He had ropes and ramps, spheres and patience. From such ordinary tools, he pulled an extraordinary clarity. He also watched things fall. The story that heavier objects dive faster had survived on common sense alone. Heavy things plow through air more convincingly, so they seemed to win every race to the ground. Galileo separated the air from the fall in his thinking and, as far as his tools allowed, in his practice, take away the air and a feather keeps company with a hammer. On the moon, that scene later became a demonstration to the whole world, two shapes sinking together into dusty light. The difference on Earth was not a secret want in the hammer or the feather. It was the constant tug of the air on surfaces of different size and mass. Even the sky bent to his quiet rebellions. He turned a telescope toward Jupiter and found small moons circling, not us, but a distant giant. He saw sunspots scarring what had been called perfect. The heavens and the ground began to share one set of rules in his mind. Circles, tilts, spins, and drifts did not need a special element or a special purpose to explain them. They needed a beginning and the absence of interference. What works for a bead on a ramp works for a planet, and for a moon, and for a ship moving between them. All of this prepared a smooth table for Newton to write upon. He arranged motion into 3 sentences at the start of a great book, and the first is the softest and most radical. An object at rest stays at rest. An object in motion stays in motion with constant speed along a straight path, unless a force changes that state. It does not spark applause when you first hear it. It lands like common sense, which is how the best clarities often land. Yet in his time, it overturned the everyday impression that motion naturally runs down. The law is quiet. It does not make anything move. It does not make anything stop. It sits underneath, promising that nothing will change without a cause. If a toy car slows, it is because the axles rub and the wheels flex and the air presses on the body. If a puck glides long on an air table, it is because the air cushion lifts the puck away from the roughness and lets inertia hold the line. In space, where the pressure of the air is almost nothing and the grains of dust are sparse, a spacecraft that has finished its burn does not coast partway and tire. It keeps its speed and direction, turning only because gravity bends the map under it. Motion persists not because anything urges it on, but because nothing reaches it to object. It helps to fold in one more gentle word. Mass is not just the heaviness in your hand. It is the measure of an object's inertia, the degree to which it resists a change in its current state. A small ceramic cup is easy to start and easy to stop. A full bucket asks for more persuasion when you lift it and more care when you set it down. Trains need long distances to slow because they carry a great deal of mass and the rails give very little help to steal speed. Skaters keep sliding long after a push because the ice offers only a thin, slippery grip. None of this is stubbornness. It is a kind of honesty. In daily life, you feel the law in your own body. A bus pulls away from the curb, and your bag tends to remain in the old story of rest. The floor provides a backward shove, and the bag tips. A car stops at a light, and your torso continues forward until the belt writes a gentle correction across your shoulder. A cup of tea leans toward the lip during a turn because the liquid tries to go straight while the cup rotates beneath it. There is no misbehavior here, only a promise that yesterday's motion will be today's. until something acts. Aristotle's notion that things seek their places does keep a poetic glow. It reminds us that humans first frame the world with stories. Over time, the stories shrink into simpler principles. Inertia is one of those. It does not choose rest over motion. It does not prefer left to right. It respects whatever state is present. That neutrality is why engineers build brakes rather than perpetual engines to slow a car. It is why a spacecraft carries small thrusters for tiny adjustments rather than a big engine to keep it from falling behind its own momentum. It is why a bowling ball scatters the pins. Each pin at rest keeps its rest until the passing ball provides a reason to move. Then, each pin carries its motion until the wooden lane and the friction of the air and the bump of another pin ask it to choose a new path. Air resistance deserves its soft mention again. It puffs against faces and flags, and it changes the way motion looks. The larger the surface compared to the mass, the more the air can boss the motion around. A leaf flutters and drifts because the air has time to settle as the leaf falls. A stone drops with less ceremony because it slices through the same air with much more mass. Recognize that, and the picture clears. The universe is not trying to trick you. It is simply busy. Underneath all of these textures, the same gentle truth holds. Motion, once begun, continues unless something acts. Rest, once settled, continues unless something asks for change. The force can be a shove, a pull, a stretch of tension, the grip of friction, the pressure of air, the steady tug we call gravity. It can also be the smallest touch of a finger on a coin, the tiniest puff of gas from a satellite's nozzle, the lift from a bird's wing as it leans into the night air. Without such touches, motion is content to persist, and rest is content to remain. There is a quiet solace in that reliability. It helps you predict and plan, but it also warms the heart a little. The world does not require constant management to keep going. Once set on a course, it continues with grace, unless there is a reason to bend or pause. That is why a flyby can fling a probe into a path that lasts for decades. That is why a well-oiled door swings a little longer. That is why a sled on a smooth hill carries laughter to the bottom before the snow rises up to gather it in. When you notice the pattern in the small things, the large things begin to feel less remote. The moon circles not because some hidden hand is pushing it along, but because it carries forward motion from its long birth, and Earth's gravity curves that path into an endless fall that never reaches the ground. Planets do the same around the Sunday stars do a slower dance in the broad arms of a galaxy, each one keeping its momentum while the mass of the whole whispers a turn. Between them, the spaces are thin. There is very little to rub away motion, so the story continues for ages. The lesson does not scold. It invites a softer kind of attention. If something is changing, look for the force. If nothing is changing, trust that no force has spoken yet. Once you learn to listen this way, the clatter of the day turns into something quieter and more legible. A cup that does not slide because the table is rough. A drawer that glides better after a drop of oil. A child on a swing asking for one last push, which is really a request for one more transfer of momentum before the air and the chains steal it back. By the time Newton gave the law its clear wording, the pieces were already in motion. Galileo had slowed the world down until its habits could be timed. Aristotle had given later minds a map to surpass. The truth that emerged is not elaborate. It is tender and patient. Nothing new happens without a reason. Everything that is happening continues until something real touches it. That is inertia. That is the hidden force that is not a force at all. And hearing it described in a whisper may be the best way to feel how steady it is, like the breath you are counting and the quiet that is settling around you now. Imagine a place with no tug on your shoes and no whisper of air on your skin, no grit under a wheel, no breeze to lean against. In that quiet, a toy car given a gentle push would glide along and never tire. There would be nothing to slow it, nothing to bend its path, except gravity if some distant mass called to it. That is the purest face of Newton's first law, motion that carries on without interruption. The same coin that once slept on a table would, in that emptiness, drift in a straight line as if time forgot to add a comma. The other half is more familiar in the body. Stillness holds its own. A morning with cool sheets knows this truth well. Muscles settle, pillows shape to the head, and rest keeps its promise until a reason arrives to change it. A stone on the ground will not slide itself across the dirt. Something must act. A pull, a shove, the steady tug of gravity down a slope, the traction of a hand. Without that something, the stone continues being exactly what it is, peaceful and unmoved. At the center of this patience is mass. Mass is not only heaviness in the palm, it is how much an object resists any attempt to change its state. A ping pong ball and a bowling ball can share a moment of perfect stillness on a tabletop. Touch them both, and the difference becomes obvious. The light sphere yields quickly. The heavy one asks for effort to start. Once rolling, the bowling ball asks for the same effort to slow. Inertia shows itself on both sides of the story, reluctant to begin and reluctant to end. Fold in another gentle word: momentum. Momentum is mass traveling with speed. It is the measure of how much push a moving thing carries. Double the speed, and the momentum doubles. Double the mass, and it doubles again. This is why big ships make wide turns, and why a train needs a long stretch of track to come to rest. There is nothing dramatic in the numbers. It is simply that more matter in motion holds a deeper commitment to its current path. The first law gives the stage its shape. Nothing changes without a cause. Motion is not more noble than rest, and rest is not more pure than motion. They are equal possibilities, and the world is content with either until a force speaks. Forces are the editors of the script. A foot that meets a soccer ball transfers momentum and sends it away. A tree trunk meets a moving car and provides a sudden, unwelcome rewrite. A couch that has lived for years on one patch of carpet enlists both mass and friction to resist your plans. You feel this law anytime you try to hurry a heavy door or keep a rolling cart from drifting downhill. The sky carries this same rule across far larger rooms. Planets travel, stars revolve, whole clusters of suns drift on their paths, not because a giant hand keeps pushing, but because they were set in motion long ago and space provides very little to resist them. A spiral galaxy turns like a slow pinwheel. A solar system glides through the local cloud. Ancient momentum threads through all of it. Motion continues when nothing interrupts, and when you want it to stop, you must provide the interruption yourself. Under all of this is a simple kindness. Things resist change, not from stubbornness or mood, but because the structure of matter carries inertia like a quiet backbone. Atoms held in a lattice, droplets in a stream of gas, pebbles in mountains. Each keeps its current state until an outside touch asks for something different. There is comfort in how predictable that is. Push, and the thing will move. Leave it be, and the thing will not. If nothing interferes, motion continues with the same speed in the same line, even when no one is watching. Balance lives here too. A person who stands still is not frozen in time. The pull of gravity is answered by the push from the ground. Left and right forces cancel in the shoes. The sums come to zero, and so the body remains where it is. Tip the balance with a breeze or a playful cat near the ankle and motion begins, not because the world changed its mind, but because the total of the forces changed. Inertia does not command. It simply resists whatever change tries to begin until the reasons add up enough to carry the day. The law's elegance comes from its neutrality. It does not praise stillness, and it does not favor speed. It reports the state and promises to maintain it until a cause appears. That promise nudges us to think in clean lines of cause and effect. If a thing speeds up, there was a force. If it slows, there was a force. If it veers, there was a force. Find the cause, and the picture becomes legible. Ignore the cause, and the picture becomes a blur. Quiet rules do not shout, but they hold the ceiling up for everything else. One such cause is friction, the unglamorous helper that keeps shoes from skidding, and pencils from slipping, and cups from sliding off tables. Without friction, daily life would be a comedy of near falls and long slides. With it, we walk, steer, stop, and carry on. Inertia would have us glide, but the surfaces we live on have their own grain. Friction is the reason your careful shove sends a book across a desk only a little way before it rests again. The book did not grow tired. The desk reached up with a quiet hand and said enough. There are two common shades of this grip. Static friction is the hold that keeps a resting object from starting to slide. It is the reason the sole of your shoe plants on a sidewalk without slipping each time you take a step. Kinetic friction is the continuing resistance once the slide has begun. It tends to be a little smaller, which is why starting a heavy box is harder than keeping it moving after it finally budges. These are not exotic forces from hidden particles. They are the tiny landscapes of surfaces meeting and disagreeing about where to go next. Air joins the conversation as a softer kind of friction called drag. Every object that moves through air must push the air aside. The faster you go, the more attention the air pays to you. At low speeds, you hardly notice. At highway speeds, it becomes a strong hand on your chest. This is why cars are shaped to be smooth, and why cyclists tuck their heads and narrow their shoulders. It is also why a skydiver stops accelerating after a while and settles into a steady fall. Gravity pulls down, air pushes up until the two are equal, and the speed becomes constant. That plateau is called terminal velocity, a truce signed in the open sky. Take the air away and things look almost otherworldly. In a vacuum, there is no drag to carry away speed. Push an object and it goes on. Spin a disk and it keeps spinning. Put a small satellite into the emptiness between planets, and after its engines rest, it glides along its path, turning only because gravity paints a curve beneath it. The purity of the law shows more clearly when the usual thieves of motion are not around to collect their toll. Zoom in on the ordinary table again, and the reason for friction becomes easier to imagine. A polished surface still looks like a mountain range when you shrink yourself to the size of its molecules. Peaks meet peaks. Valleys catch edges. There is also adhesion, a slight stickiness where molecules in one surface tug on molecules in the other. Together, these tiny features create a net that resists sliding. It is like two soft strips of hook and loop pressed together. The hooks and loops are atoms, making brief acquaintances, holding on just long enough to turn motion into warmth. Friction is what lets a car take a curve without sailing off in a straight line. The tires press into the road, and the road returns the favor with a sideways push that bends the car's path to match the bend in the asphalt. Lose that grip on ice or wet leaves, and inertia shows its face. The car keeps going straight while the road curves away. Steering feels like a suggestion no one is taking. In those seconds, you are watching the first law in action and wishing for more grip. Sometimes we want a lot of friction, climbing stairs, carrying a stack of dishes, holding a railing in winter. Other times, we want very little. Ice skates glide because steel on ice builds a thin melt layer that acts like a lubricant. Engineers add oil to gears and graphite to locks so the tiny mountains cannot grab one another. Spacecraft arrive home through thickening air and must manage fierce friction with heat shields, turning energy into light that glows in the night sky while the cabin stays calm. You know the household version too well. Slide a couch across a rug and the rug fights back one fiber at a time. The heavier the couch, the more the fibers press together, the more contact, the more resistance. Reduce the weight and the grip lessens. Slip furniture sliders under the legs and you lower the friction, and suddenly the stubborn couch behaves like a friend who has decided to help you move. None of this makes friction the villain. Without it, pencils would not leave a mark. Fingers could not find a note on a violin string. Shoes would be decorations rather than tools. Even fire can be coaxed from the heat that stubborn contact creates, a camp skill made from patience and the right kind of wood. Friction is simply reliable. It steals motion a little at a time. It reshapes things slowly. Soles thin, hinges loosen, wind and sand polish cliffs until they shine. Over years and centuries, friction writes the soft script of wear. Materials carry their own habits here. Glass offers a different feel than wood. Sandpaper insists on attention. Rubber grips with loyalty, which is why tire treads and running shoes are made from it. Each pair of materials has a number, a coefficient of friction, that sums up how grabby the partnership will be. Designers look for the sweet spot each time, enough grip to be safe and useful. Not so much that everything grinds itself into fatigue. Even sound enters through friction. A bow drawn across a violin string creates a tiny stick and slip many times each second. The string vibrates, and the air vibrates with it. A whisper on a chalkboard is the same physics in a less friendly form. Motion becomes vibration. Vibration becomes waves in the air, and the ear turns the waves into feeling. When the room is quiet, it helps to remember that the world will not change without reason. Motion continues when nothing resists it. Rest continues when nothing disturbs it. Change announces itself with a cause you can usually name: push, pull, weight, drag, grip, a gentle gust, a careful brake, the lean of a bicycle, the small shove you give a swing. In the spaces between stars, where the air thins to almost nothing, the first law sings almost alone. In kitchens and streets, it hums alongside friction and the push of the air. Hold the map this way. Inertia keeps the present story. Mass measures how loyal an object is to that story. Momentum tells you how much story is moving through space. Forces are the editors. Friction is the copy editor that trims every sentence. Air is the page that sometimes sticks as you turn it. Gravity is the hand that curves a straight line just enough to turn a fall into a circle. With these few companions, most motions become clear, from a book that slides to a stop, to a satellite that keeps sailing while the engines rest. Nothing about this needs to be loud. The rules are gentle because they are steady. If a thing is still, it stays still. If a thing is moving, it stays moving, unless something speaks to it. That is all. And in that small sentence lives the reason a child can coast on a scooter, the reason a skydiver finds a constant speed, the reason a satellite can circle the Earth on engines that sleep most of the time, and the reason your hand feels the weight of a bowling ball as not only heaviness, but commitment. Keep that in mind the next time a morning asks you to rise or a quiet road invites you to glide. The same law is keeping both promises. Friction is the quiet equalizer of motion. It shows up everywhere, trimming our enthusiasm with a gentle, necessary tug. It keeps shoes honest on the sidewalk and wheels honest on the road. When your socks cling to the carpet, when the brakes give a soft squeal, when a pen refuses to glide, it is not a grudge. It is simply friction doing its patient work, slowing wild movement, smoothing rough edges, and keeping the world from sliding out of control. The story turns to mass, a word we use freely until someone asks what it really means. In everyday talk, we call a sandwich massive or a migraine massive, but in physics, mass has a clear, elegant purpose. Mass measures inertia. It tells how strongly an object holds to whatever it is already doing. If something rests, mass helps it remain settled. If something moves, mass helps it keep moving. The more mass, the stronger the resistance to any attempt to speed up, slow down, or turn aside. Big things are not stubborn in a human way. They are consistent in a physical way. Picture a shopping cart, empty. It dances down an aisle with the smallest nudge. Fill it with a pyramid of soup cans and a watermelon, and the dance becomes a slow march. The top speed is not the point. The point is how much effort it takes to change the cart's state. That effort rises with mass. In the same spirit, a bowling ball sitting beside a tennis ball looks just as quiet, yet your palms learn instantly which one demands persuasion. The bowling ball resists the start and resists the stop with equal conviction. That is inertia, speaking through mass. We often mix mass and weight in conversation, but they are not the same. Weight is the pull of gravity on mass. Change the planet, and you change the weight. Mass does not care. On the moon, you would weigh less, yet you would be just as hard to push as you are on Earth. Your body's resistance to acceleration belongs to you wherever you stand. A bowling ball always has more mass than a tennis ball in any room of the universe. Newton wrapped this relationship in a simple line that lives in every physics notebook. Force equals mass times acceleration. More mass means more force is needed to create the same change in motion. A parked car does not leap forward because you believe in effort. It yields only when feet and hands apply enough steady push to overcome both mass and friction. A fly taps a screen and stops. A freight train meets a bank of brakes and needs long steel and long patience before its motion fades. The difference is not poetry, it is mass. Fold in momentum, the measure that treats motion like something that can be carried. Momentum is mass multiplied by velocity. Double the mass, and you double the momentum. Double the speed, and you double it again. That is why a cannonball and a ping-pong ball, traveling side by side at the same pace, are not the same kind of visitor when they arrive. Momentum gives moving things their punch, and mass is half of that punch. The way mass shapes motion is easy to feel in the hands. Throw a baseball with an easy wind-up and it leaps away. Try the same gesture with a bowling ball, and the throw turns into a lift and a hope. The larger mass resists the same acceleration. Once things are moving, mass continues to matter. Big trucks do not stop on a dime. Ships turn with wide grace because they carry motion like a deep river carries volume. Steering and braking become conversations rather than commands. Out in orbit, the dialogue becomes even clearer. A satellite circles Earth in thin air. There is little to rub away its speed. Mass holds the path steady until a small thruster whispers a change. That whisper must be planned with care. Even a tiny push shifts the path because inertia sits in the background, calm and firm, asking for precision each time you edit a trajectory. Mass is not only an obstacle to your plans to move furniture, it is a fundamental trait of matter. Atoms carry mass. Protons and neutrons provide most of it. Electrons contribute a trace. The reason particles have mass at all is connected to a field that fills space like a thin syrup, the Higgs field. Particles that couple strongly to this field act heavy. Those that couple weakly act light. The discovery of the Higgs boson was a clue that this picture is real. The nickname many people gave it made scientists wince, but the idea it points to is gentle and profound. Even everyday resistance to acceleration has roots in something as large as a field that touches everything. Back at human scale, mass lives in every motion you make. Push a door, and you feel a small negotiation between your hand and the door's reluctance to change. Throw snow and laugh at how easily it flies compared to a frozen turkey that would rather stay put. When a bus speeds up, your body leans back for a heartbeat because your mass tries to keep the old pace until the seat and the floor bring you into agreement with the bus. When you sit, the chair pushes up as strongly as you press down. Gravity pulls. The chair answers. The balance is quiet and complete. Mass can be inconvenient. It makes lifting and shipping and launching hard work. It forces us to respect energy and plan our efforts. The very inconvenience is also part of what makes the world coherent. Because mass resists sudden changes, the bookshelf does not topple when a breeze wanders through the room, and a plate does not fly away when you sneeze. Actions require energy. Changes have causes. Motion carries meaning once it begins. That reliability is a kind of safety woven into matter. Seen this way, heaviness is not just a number on a scale. It is a measure of how much an object pushes back against change. In the quiet language of physics, it says, try a little harder. That quiet pushback gives matter dignity. It keeps the universe from behaving like loose leaves in a storm. Now picture a peaceful morning and a warm mug in your hand. The house is calm. You take a step. The coffee rises like a small brown tide and, with one more stride, leaps the rim and marks your shirt. It feels like a personal betrayal, but it is your old companion inertia doing what it always does. Newton's first law is at work, not just in your walk, but in the liquid itself. When you walk, you, the cup, and the coffee are moving together. Your legs, your arm, and your hand give the cup its speed. The liquid travels with the cup, but it is not a solid block. It lags and sways. When your pace changes, the coffee keeps going for a moment. When you stop, the coffee hopes to continue. The cup interrupts. The liquid climbs the wall, and gravity helps it return, sometimes over the edge, often onto the nearest fabric. Every step is a small acceleration or deceleration. Each one sends a wave through the coffee. The wave runs to the opposite side, reflects, and meets the next wave. The cup becomes a tiny theater for fluid dynamics. The motion is not just back and forth. It is a set of rhythms that mingle and sometimes add together. Engineers call this sloshing. In spaceflight, it is serious business because liquid fuel shifting inside a tank can nudge a rocket enough to spoil a path. In the kitchen, the stakes are lower unless the carpet is pale and the mug is very full. Like a swing on a playground, liquid has a natural frequency. If your steps match that rhythm, you feed the wave and it grows. That is resonance. A few well-timed pushes send the swing higher. A few well-timed steps send the coffee closer to escape. Walk a little faster or slower, and you drift away from the troublesome rhythm. Hold the mug a bit lower, and the motion of your body damps the slosh. Bend your elbow, and your arm becomes a soft suspension. People discover these tactics without equations. We learn to carry coffee the way a tightrope walker learns to place a foot. Gait changes, steps shorten. The spill becomes a near miss. Researchers have even measured these ordinary tricks. When people walk more slowly and keep the cup close to the body, spills are less likely. Many of us do this without thinking, introducing small irregularities that keep the liquid from finding a steady beat. A small change in stride, a slight bend in the wrist, a pause before the doorway, and the wave settles. The same law that flings coffee also controls the rest of what happens in a sudden stop. Your feet halt, your torso wants to continue, your arm swings, the cup follows, the liquid continues farther still. In a car, all of this happens faster and louder. That is why lids exist and why seat belts exist and why a gentle braking distance is a kindness to everything inside the cabin. Nothing is misbehaving. Everything is keeping faith with inertia until a force arrives to write a different line. What slows the coffee's rebellion is the same pair of companions that slow almost everything else. Friction along the cup's wall tames the wave. Air drag on the surface adds a tiny hand of resistance. If the mug is full, there is little room for the wave to dissipate. If the mug is half full, the wave has space to grow. The shape of the cup matters as well. A taller, narrower mug tends to slosh with a different rhythm than a wide one. Travel cups with lids and baffles are small architectural answers to sloshing. They break the wave before it finds a steady song. This little kitchen drama reveals how deeply the first law lives in our day. A book that slides and comes to rest is not tired. Friction did the work. A couch that refuses to cross a rug is not spiteful. Mass and the carpet's fibers are working together. A train that takes a long stretch to stop is not arrogant. Its momentum is large, and the brakes must turn that motion into heat, a little at a time. A satellite that keeps circling while its engines sleep is not lucky. The air is thin, and inertia holds the line, while gravity bends it into a loop. Mass stands at the center of each of these moments with quiet authority. It resists change when motion is starting. It resists change when motion is ending. It resists the turn, the sway, and the sudden stop. Friction partners with it, sometimes as grip that keeps us safe, sometimes as drag that wears us down. Together, they draw the edges of everyday experience. Shoes need rubber because rubber grips. Skates need sharp steel because ice lets go. Engineers choose lubricants so that gears will last, and they shape car bodies to let the air slide past with less complaint. Over long years, friction polishes stone and thins leather and rounds the corners of wooden banisters where many hands have passed. All of this is a soft way of saying the universe prefers consistency until given a reason to change. Mass gives the preference its strength. Friction gives it texture. Momentum gives it memory. Forces give it permission to be different. When you notice a change, you can almost always point to the cause. When nothing changes, you can trust that the balance holds. Keep that map in your pocket. It works for a dripping mug on a sleepy morning and for a spacecraft crossing the night between planets. Think of that moment when you take a careful sip of tea in a moving car and end up wearing a warm mustache anyway. That little arc from cup to lip isn't betrayal, it's inertia finding a path. One more step makes the liquid surge, and if the timing lines up, the rim becomes a suggestion instead of a wall. The quiet key is the center of mass. In a rigid object, it sits in one place. In a cup of coffee, it roams. With each sway, the liquid's weight gathers and shifts forward and upward along the inner wall. When that shifting center climbs above the lip at just the right angle, the edge no longer protects you. Out goes the coffee, faithful to the motion it already had. Your hands learn to manage this without equations. A wrist tilts a little, an elbow softens the step, fingers change the cup's angle as if they could hear the liquid thinking. We make thousands of tiny corrections by feel. Robots don't have that quiet library of muscle memory. Teaching a machine to carry soup down a hallway means sensing the small accelerations from each footfall, watching the surface for a growing wave, and predicting how one jolt will invite the next. What looks like grace is really feedback and timing. Tilt the cup a finger width before the crest arrives. Shorten the stride, lower the elbow, so your arm becomes a soft suspension. If you need a kind reason to forgive a morning spill, remember that avoiding it means mastering a lively little system of waves, inertia, and rhythm. We tend to picture inertia in cars and rockets, but it's present in every swallow. The liquid isn't defiant. It's honest. It doesn't know you chose to pause by the counter. It only knows that a heartbeat ago it was moving, and so it continues until something redirects it. The same honesty explains why drinks leap during turbulence. The cabin rises or dips, the floor tilts, and the coffee keeps its old path until the cup or your lip catches it. Your frame of reference changes, the liquid's does not instantly. Attention helps, because attention changes timing. Slow the pace, keep the mug closer to your body, let your shoulder absorb each step. You're stretching the change over a little more time, which quietly reduces the force that reaches the coffee's surface. Every spill is a gentle lesson. Motion continues unless interrupted. Change appears when a force speaks. The same rules that guide a satellite along a long arc also guide the amber tide in your mug. Once you see that, the morning becomes a soft blackboard, a sip, a step, a small wave that climbs and settles, and the law reveals itself again. Settle into a driver's seat and notice how much trust you place in glass and steel. You buckle the belt, the road opens. At 60 miles an hour, you, your bones, your coffee, your bag, and the coins in the console are all traveling together. Inertia keeps every piece moving with the same speed in the same direction. As long as the ride is smooth, the collaboration is invisible. Trouble appears when the car stops and you do not. In a sudden halt, the vehicle loses speed first. Everything inside continues until another force arrives. That isn't rudeness. It's the first law keeping its promise. Safety engineering is an art of kindness to that promise. A seatbelt is simple, but it ties you to the frame and spreads the stop across the strong parts of the body. The webbing stretches a little, adding time to the deceleration and lowering the peak force on chest and hips. Pretensioners pull away slack the instant sensors sense trouble. Load limiters. Then allow a measured give. so your ribs aren't asked to do too much at once. Airbags take the next role. They aren't pillows. They're fast, expanding surfaces that meet you in the blink of an eye. By increasing the time over which your motion is brought to zero, they reduce the average force your body must endure. In the language of physics, slower is kinder. Crumple zones follow the same logic. Parts of the car are designed to fail on purpose, so metal bends and folds in controlled ways. The structure eats kinetic energy before the remainder reaches you. Think of catching a fast ball. Hold your hand stiff and the stop is sharp. Let your hand travel back with the ball and the stop is longer, the force smaller. Cars do this with steel, aluminum, and seams that unzip in the right order. Even windshields have learned to be humane. Laminated glass is two sheets with a thin plastic between them. If it breaks, the plastic holds the pieces together so there are no blades of glass flying through the cabin. Head restraints sit close to the skull so torso and head decelerate together and the neck is spared. Side beams route impact loads around the passenger cell. Steering columns collapse instead of becoming spears. Some systems even tug the belt tight and adjust a headrest a split second before impact, so everything is in the best position when inertia throws its weight around. Mass sits at the center of these choices. More mass means more momentum to bleed away. Designers do more than count pounds. They care where the weight lives, which paths it offers the force when a collision happens, and which materials should deform first. A low, central center of gravity keeps a car planted. Weight high up invites a roll. Weight too far forward lengthens stopping distance and makes the nosedive under braking. Much of this tuning happens long before a car touches a road. Computer models crash thousands of digital vehicles, exploring angles and speeds that would be impractical to test with prototypes. Then come sleds, barriers, and high-speed cameras. Dummies packed with sensors measure accelerations at the skull, chest, pelvis, and shins. The numbers return as new welds, smarter folds, and gentler cushions. History sharpens the contrast. There was a time when dashboards were metal and steering columns didn't collapse. A minor crash could be catastrophic because the stop was too short. As our respect for motion deepened, we traded a little sheet metal for a lot of life. Today, a small overlap crash can peel away the front corner of a car while the cabin stays quiet enough for someone to unbuckle and step out. Even pedestrian safety joins the conversation. Hoods are shaped with crush space so a struck head experiences a longer, softer stop rather than a sharp blow. Tires, brakes, and road define the ceiling for how quickly motion can be traded for heat without sliding. Anti-lock systems hold you near that limit while the wheel stays steerable. Everything is tuned to turn a violent stop into a longer, more forgiving one. Buckle the belt and listen to the chime. That small sound is an invitation to a choreography between human habit and natural law. The coffee that tried to escape your cup and the restraint that keeps you safe are governed by the same sentences. One stains a shirt, the other saves a life. Both are honest about motion. Lift your gaze from the road and picture a rocket on a launch pad. Tanks full, white paint gleaming, engines light. The ground shivers. The craft climbs, fighting air and gravity with clenched fists of fire. The ascent is noisy because Earth is tug and drag and heat. Then the engines cut. The roar vanishes. The path does not. The vehicle keeps going with the speed it earned. Above the thick air, there is no wind to argue and no rough surface to steal speed. What looks like magic from the ground is simply motion with nothing in the way. Space is a gentle stage for the first law. Give a spacecraft a speed and a direction, and it will keep both until something else acts. Gravity is the patient painter that curves a straight line into a circle around a planet or a long arc toward another world. That is why rockets burn hard for a short while and then rest. Most of the journey is quiet coasting. Small thrusters make small edits. Momentum carries the rest. Inside the vehicle, attitude control follows the same patience. Reaction wheels spin like tucked flywheels. To turn the craft, you speed one wheel up and the body turns the other way, borrowing angular momentum and returning it later. Magnetarkers push against Earth's magnetic field to bleed off excess spin. Fuel tanks carry baffles for the same reason your travel mug carries a lid. They break up long waves so the center of mass doesn't wander at the worst moment. Once in orbit, the efficient way to change lanes is not to muscle through space, but to time two short burns so the new path kisses the old one in two places. That gentle exchange is a Hohmann transfer. It looks almost lazy compared to launch, and that is the point. Use force when you must. Let inertia carry you the rest of the way. Engines sleep for hours while the vehicle glides along a path written by its initial push and the quiet geometry of gravity. Seen together, a kitchen spill, a safe stop, and a coasting spacecraft are variations on one melody. Motion keeps its story until a force edits the line. Spread the change over a little more time, and the force that reaches you becomes smaller. That is why a measured gait saves a shirt, why a belt and a bag save a life, and why a silent engine can carry a traveler most of the way across the night. The engines give the first gift. Fire presses on metal. The vehicle leans into the sky, and the climb begins against gravity's tug and the hand of thick air. Once the craft slips into the higher quiet where air thins to almost nothing, the noise fades. The math changes. You do not burn to keep moving. You burn only to change how you are moving. A short push to speed up or slow down. A small nudge to turn. If no change is needed, you let the motion continue. A child who has been pushed on a swing does not need another shove every second. The swing carries the child for a while. In space, that while can be very long. This is why astronauts drift around the International Space Station as if gravity had taken the day off. Gravity has not gone anywhere. Up there, it is still strong, only a little weaker than at the surface. The difference is that the station and everyone inside it are falling together. Imagine stepping off a tall ledge, please only in thought, and at the same time moving sideways so quickly that the ground curves away beneath you at the same rate that you fall. You never reach the ground because the ground keeps missing you. That is orbit. The body and the floor, the cup and the spoon, the pen and the pocket are all falling at the same rate. With no floor to stop the fall, weight turns into a soft suspension. Inertia helps keep the balance. The station wants to fly straight. Earth pulls inward. The result is a graceful curve that closes on itself. One loop takes about 90 minutes, which means 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets in a single day of clocks and calendars. The path is not a standoff. It is a conversation between forward motion and a steady pull. As long as nothing big interferes, the conversation continues without raising its voice. Coming home is a different kind of grace. You cannot turn motion off like a lamp. You must work against it. A spacecraft points small thrusters opposite the direction of travel and fires them. The speed falls. Gravity does the rest and the vehicle descends into thicker air. Air becomes a partner and a rival at once. Drag grows. Heat blooms along the shield, and what was silent, gliding, becomes a long, bright exchange between speed and resistance. The landing that follows is a sign that enough outside forces finally spoke. Even simple turning is different up there. On a road, you twist a steering wheel, and tires push on pavement. In orbit, there is nothing to push against. Spacecraft rotate by pushing on their own exhaust, or by borrowing and returning spin with reaction wheels inside the body. A small puff of gas out one side produces a gentle twist in the other direction. That is Newton's third law, action and reaction, written with breath instead of asphalt. Once rotating, the vehicle keeps rotating until another puff or a wheel or a magnetic torque bar touches the motion and settles it. Astronauts meet the same rule with their hands. Turn a wrench and your body wants to turn the other way. Forget to brace, and the twist you give the bolt gives you a slow spin in reply. Moving from one end of the station to the other is not really walking. It is more like swimming in clear air. You reach for a rail, you draw yourself along. You slow with a light touch before a wall answers your drift. Tools set free do not stay where you last saw them. A screwdriver floats in a straight line at the same speed until it meets a vent or a glove and is given a new instruction. Order is not fussy habit in such rooms. It is safety. The laws of motion listen to reasons, not excuses. Small experiments have shown this to the eye with charming clarity. A disc spun with a drop of water clinging to it becomes a stage for surface tension and inertia. The drop stretches into a bead and a ring. It does not fall. There is nowhere to fall to because the whole cabin is falling together. In that clean theater, Newton's sentences feel almost tender. No breeze to muddle the story. No hidden slope to mislead. Only mass, force, and motion playing fair. The same simplicity holds at larger scales. Planets are coasting. The sun bends their straight paths into wide loops. The Earth turns. The moon circles. Comets sweep long ovals that take them close to the sun and then send them back into deep cold for years. None of this asks for a motor to keep pushing. It only asks for an initial speed and a persistent pull. Where there are few other forces to meddle, motion keeps its promise. If the night sky makes orbits look like magic, a small picture can make them feel human. Imagine a cannon on a very high mountain that fires a ball perfectly level with the ground. A gentle shot, and the ball falls to earth a short distance away. A stronger shot, and it travels farther before the ground meets it. Fire it fast enough and the ground curves away as quickly as the ball falls. The ball never finds a landing. It keeps missing the ground while always falling. That is what a satellite does. The picture goes back to Newton's own day, and it still works. Low Earth orbit needs a speed of about 8 kilometers each second, a little under 30,000 kilometers each hour. At that pace, the forward motion balances the inward pull, and a stable loop forms. If you go faster, you can trace a larger circle, climb to a higher orbit, or follow an ellipse that rises and falls. If you fast enough to meet the number we call escape velocity, a little over 11 kilometers each second for Earth, you are no longer bound to the planet. The sun still holds you, and the galaxy still holds the sun, but Earth's hand has let go. Weightlessness in orbit is not an absence of gravity. It is an absence of support. Everything inside the craft is falling together. Without a floor to push back, you feel light. The moon and the tides remind us that this falling is part of our daily life. The moon's steady pull lifts oceans as Earth turns. Now and then the geometry lines up and we see the shadow of one body slide across another. A quiet walk under a bright disk owes itself to the same balance of motion and fall. Orbits come in many shapes. Circles are neat. but ellipses are common. A satellite can live in a close path that circles the planet in hours, or it can drift in a high ring that keeps pace with Earth's rotation and appears to hang in one place above the equator. That is a geostationary orbit, a high, slow circle that lets a dish on a rooftop point to the same piece of sky every day. The farther you are from the center of Earth, the weaker the pull, so the lower the speed needed to stay aloft. Closer in, you must move faster to keep from slipping down. Nothing in the sky is perfectly permanent. Even when it looks serene, the moon creeps away from us by centimeters each year because tides move energy between Earth and its companion. Satellites in very low orbits brush the thin upper air and slowly lose height unless they are nudged now and then. Designers budget small bursts of propellant for these housekeeping tasks. When a craft reaches the end of its work, it can be allowed to fall and burn cleanly in the atmosphere, or it can be placed in a high graveyard orbit where it will not trouble the paths below. The International Space Station keeps its path by occasional reboosts that add back the speed lost to that faint drag. Each maneuver is small. Most of the time, the structure sails along by itself, a bright dot that can cross the night above a backyard in a few minutes. Inside, sunrise and sunset visit every 45 minutes. Outside, solar arrays follow the sun, and radiators glow with the heat of busy rooms. All of it rests on the simple rule that motion continues without help and changes only when something acts. When a mission must change orbits, the most gentle method uses two short burns with a coast between them. The craft leaves its current circle on a path that is half of a larger ellipse, then inserts into the new circle at the other end. The efficiency comes from letting inertia do most of the work. A little push at the right time is worth far more than a long shove at the wrong one. Deep space voyages use the same thrift on a grander scale. A probe swings past a planet and borrows a little speed by falling through its gravity field, then pays back the debt by climbing away on a new line. The planet gives up a tiny piece of its own motion in return. The trade is so small that no one notices, yet it can carry a traveler to the outer darkness. Even the choice to stop in orbit uses the same reasoning. To return, a craft turns around, fires against its own motion, and lets drag grow in the thickening air. The heat shield carries the consequence of that choice, so the cabin does not have to. The time of the stop is lengthened by the shape of the path and the angle of entry, and that length is what keeps the forces kind. The language of center of mass comes back here in a helpful way. Every craft has a point where its mass balances. Keep that point where you want it, and the vehicle behaves. Let it wander, and the vehicle can wobble or flip. Baffles in fuel tanks break up large waves, so the shifting liquid does not walk the center of mass away at the worst moment. Small jets and reaction wheels keep the nose where it should be. The same idea explains why a figure skater spins faster when the arms come in. Pull the mass closer to the axis, and the rotation speeds up. Extend the mass, and the rotation slows. Angular momentum stays the same. The shape edits the rate. All of this can sound like grand machinery, but the feeling of it is gentle. Objects in motion stay in motion. Objects at rest stay at rest. Nothing dramatic is required to keep in orbit, to float in a cabin, or to let a rocket glide once the roaring part is done. What is required is respect. Burn only when you must. Give yourself time to change. Make small corrections early rather than large ones late. Trust the straight line until gravity bends it for you. Look up on a clear night and it is easy to feel a calm you can trust. Every bright dot, Every slow wanderer, every faint streak has its own path, not random, not reckless, but guided by rules older than memory. Space looks wild. It behaves politely. Moons, meteors, asteroids, comets, all of them are keeping appointments made by inertia. It does not steer or scold. It simply keeps motion faithful to itself until a real reason appears to change it. In the deep emptiness between worlds, reasons are rare, so the dance endures. Take our moon. It is not hanging like a lantern on a hook. It is always falling toward Earth while moving forward fast enough to keep missing the ground. Inertia pulls the path straight. Gravity curves that path inward. The blend is an ellipse that has held for billions of years. Jupiter offers a grander gallery. Dozens of moons circle it, and a few of them, like Io, Europa, and Ganymede, keep time in a resonant rhythm. Their orbits tug one another into a lace of precise periods. They are not spiraling in or drifting out by the day. The balance is careful and slow. Tides do trade energy, so orbits do evolve. Phobos around Mars is inching inward and will one day crack or fall. But the clock for such endings does not count in seasons. It counts in ages. Between Mars and Jupiter spreads the asteroid belt, a wide neighborhood of leftovers from the solar system's building years. Some are no bigger than a house. Some, like Ceres, are worlds in miniature. Jupiter's gravity kept a full planet from forming there, always tugging at the assembly line. Even so, each piece that found a stable lane keeps it. The belt is not a constant pile-up. It is a slow river where every rock follows its own forward fall around the sunday. Some paths are almost round. Others are long ovals that lean close and then swing far. The poetry is in the persistence. No one needs to push. Comets prefer dramatic entrances. Many sleep in distant reservoirs. The Kuiper Belt close by, the Oort cloud far beyond, where the sun's pull is a whisper, a nudge from a passing star, a long tide in the galaxy, or a quiet shuffle among neighbors can send one inward. Heat wakes the ice. Gas and dust stream away, and sunlight and the solar wind comb that stream into a tail that points from the sun, not behind the motion. Halley returns on a 76-year loop, the calendar in its coma, older than any one lifetime. Closer to the sun, it speeds up, whips around, and races outward again. Sometimes a giant planet bends a comet's path, stealing or giving speed. The change feels sudden on a map, but the law is the same. Inertia keeps the story going between every meeting. Smaller pieces drift too. Meteoroids are bits of stone and metal wandering on their own lines. When a piece meets our thin blue air, it brightens into a meteor. If the core survives and rests on a field, it becomes a meteorite. Before that glow and thud, nothing noisy is happening. A line through space intersects another line at just the right moment. Most things miss. The sky is big, and the timings rarely match. When they do, it is alignment, not chaos. Even collisions bow to inertia. Speed, direction, and mass decide the outcome. A glancing blow can share momentum like a gentle billiards shot and nudge both travelers into new orbits. A head-on meeting can shatter one body into a glowing fan of fragments that settle into rings or fall as a quiet rain of dust. Sometimes two objects merge and spin as one, their combined mass giving them a new center and a new path. The Q-chalk is always the same set of rules. no trick shots needed. A favorite proof of this patience is still flying. The Voyager probes left in the late 1970 seconds took a tour of the outer planets with carefully timed gravity assists and then kept going. No engine runs now. No constant push. Voyager 1 has passed into interstellar space, the sun's wind thin behind it, the next star so far that even radio takes a day to cross the distance back home. The probe is still moving because nothing has told it to stop. It is a message in a bottle that never finds a shore. Step back farther, and the canvas fills with motion that is slow enough to feel like stillness. Stars circle the centers of galaxies. Galaxies drift along threads of the cosmic web. Clusters tug on clusters, and the whole scene stretches with the fabric of space itself. To us, falling is a story with an impact at the end. Out there, falling can be the endless grace of an orbit, a safe forever, where forward speed and inward pull never finish their argument. Moons fall around planets. Planets fall around stars. Comets fall around the sun and then fall back toward the dark. Inertia is the keeper of the pace. The same habit of staying with what works appears in places that do not look like physics problems at first glance. Life carries its own version of inertia, not the push and pull of forces, but a preference for keeping good solutions in place. Evolution is a river that wanders, but it does not jump its banks each afternoon. Most of the time, it follows the path of least resistance. When a trait works well, it tends to remain. Sharks, crocodiles, and horseshoe crabs wear the shapes of deep time. They are not frozen. They are simply well-suited. The sum of small pressures around them has not demanded a new blueprint. Innovation does arrive, but it is expensive. Mutations happen in numbers, and most change, nothing helpful. A few harm, a few help. Each helpful change must fit the body that is already there. You cannot add wheels to a deer in one lucky season. You cannot swap bones for airfoils without 1,000 careful steps between. Life builds by remodeling, not by tearing down to the foundation. That is why there are no animals with square frames. It is not because nature lacks imagination. It is because the path from here to square has no small steps that keep a body alive. Consider the giraffe. A neck that long looks like it should take extra bones to manage the reach. Mammals use 7 cervical vertebrae, and giraffes still use 7. Each one is stretched, the tendons trained, the vessels routed, but the count stays. Changing the number would mean rewiring early development, where even small edits can echo in dangerous ways. In a similar way, a bat's wing, a whale's flipper, and a human arm are all variations on a shared pattern. 1 long bone, 2 next bones, a cluster of small bones, and digits beyond. The theme is conserved. The instruments change the melody. At the level of information, the story is even more steady. The genetic code that turns 3-letter words in DNA into amino acids is almost universal. Bacteria and blue whales read the same dictionary. In principle, it could have been otherwise. In practice, once the code worked, everything else learned to speak it. To change it now would be to break the translation in every cell at once. There was no pressure strong enough to make that leap, so the language stayed. Ecosystems carry inertia too. Coral reefs, rainforests, prairies, tundra, all can settle into dynamic stability. Nothing is truly static. Populations rise and fall. Seasons rearrange the light. Storms stir the pot. Yet feedbacks pull the system back toward a center. Fewer wolves and deer bloom. Vegetation thins, and the deer suffer. The balance mends a little. Tips do exist. Push hard enough, long enough, and reefs bleach beyond easy repair. Forests shift, grasslands dry, and choose a new mix of plants. Once moved to a new basin of stability, a system can resist the trip back, the same way a heavy door resists being swung both ways in a gust. Inertia protects, and once broken, hinders. Some traits linger, like old furniture, because nothing has pressed hard enough to move them out. The appendix once helped ancestors digest rough plants. Now it is mostly quiet, occasionally troublesome, but not harmful enough to vanish completely. Wisdom teeth do not fit as well as they did when jaws were broader. Goosebumps raise invisible fur on skin that no longer needs the extra thickness. They remain because their cost is small, and the machinery that would remove them has had no urgent reason to act. Seen side by side, the sky's calm mechanics and life's patient habits feel like two verses of the same song. Motion continues unless a force acts. Living forms continue unless pressure or chance asks for change and provides a workable path to it. Orbits glide because space is generous and gravity is steady. Lineages endure because feedbacks reward what already fits and punish what cannot be supported. In both stories, timing matters and history matters. Where you are on the path shapes what you can do next. There is comfort in that reliability. A moon keeps time across the centuries because nothing large walks into its lane. A species keeps its shape because its world keeps asking for the same solutions. When the ask changes, the response follows, but never all at once. It is increments, resonances, and adjustments. A comet leans in and whips around. A population leans toward a new climate, and its genes edge in a matching direction. A satellite drifts, and a tiny burn returns it to height. A forest thins, and a careful reintroduction of a keystone species nudges the loop back toward green. Inertia is not showy, it is persistent. It is the quiet contract that holds a moon in its arc and an ecosystem in its rhythm. It lets a probe coast into the dark on a push it received long ago. It keeps a lineage steady until there is a compelling reason to move. When a reason arrives, change writes itself into the motion or into the body. When it does not, everything holds. The night sky looks serene because countless balances are working. The living world feels familiar because countless balances are holding. And at the center of each scene is the same idea, simple and faithful. Continue as you are until something real asks you to become something else. Evolution leans less toward perfection and more toward good enough. If a trait does not cause enough trouble to be filtered out, it often stays, because replacing it costs more than it saves. Behavior carries that same quiet momentum. Birds keep building familiar nests. Wolves still hunt in coordinated packs. People find each other and knit small circles of belonging. These are layered habits, shaped by many generations of pressure that was gentle but persistent. Once they settle into a species' way of life, they do not vanish overnight. New challenges arrive, yet instinct takes time to bend. Life leans on proven strategies while it feels its way forward. There is comfort in this biological inertia. The forms around us, the eyes and wings, the trees and fins, were not chosen for flawlessness. They survive because they are functional, dependable, and adaptable enough. The steadier the environment, the more living things lean into old designs. When the environment shifts quickly, as with climate change, pollution, or vanishing habitats, that same steadiness turns risky. The slow pace that once protected lineages can leave them exposed. Changing course takes generations, and sometimes The calendar does not offer that gift. Human activity now writes itself into the story. We have become a fast river pressing on a slow bank. Entire ecosystems rearrange within years. Species meet pressures with no precedent in their histories. New chemicals, urban noise, artificial light at night, plastic in food webs, warmer waters and thinner snows. Life still tries. Moths darken to match city soot. Birds adjust migration and breeding windows. Fish shift spawning grounds. Evolution may be slow, but it is not asleep. With enough force, even a river cuts a new channel. It is humbling to remember that our bodies, our reflexes, and our homes in nature are all products of inertia. We carry the echoes of ancient fish, of early primates, of the first microbial cooperatives. These lineages resisted change not because they were stuck, but because they were successful. Like the laws of motion, evolution honors the past. It saves what works, nudges where it can, and only rarely leaps. A yawn, a stretch, a shiver in cold air are very old acts. They survived because they helped. In those small moments, you are part of a long motion, form and function, gliding through time on the momentum of what came before. Morning routines reveal a softer kind of inertia. The alarm stirs, a snooze or two, feet on the floor, the familiar drink, a glance at the light in the window or the pet asking for breakfast. It all unfolds with easy rhythm. This pull of the familiar is not laziness. It is mental inertia. Like a moving object that prefers to keep going, thoughts and patterns like to continue along the grooves they know. If you have ever tried to start a new habit or retire an old one, you have felt this resistance up close. It can be frustrating, yet it is also how the brain protects energy. The brain is small compared to the whole body, and it asks for a large share of the body's fuel. It is built to search for shortcuts. One of the best shortcuts is the habit loop. With repetition, neural pathways thicken like footpaths in grass. Actions that were once deliberate become automatic. That frees attention for harder things, for problem solving and creativity, or simply for noticing a pigeon on the sill. This is smart biology. You do not need to rethink how to lace your shoes each day. You press play and carry on. The trade-off is familiar. Once a pattern forms, it resists being moved. Here, the mental version of Newton's first law shows itself. A mind at rest tends to stay with what it has been doing. A pattern in motion tends to continue in the same direction. Changing course takes extra force, and often more than we predict. This is why plans made in the warm glow of a new year can cool by February. We imagine dramatic change and forget the silent pull of our grooves. Procrastination is another shape of the same thing. It is not always avoidance. Often it is the difficulty of crossing the first threshold. Starting a big or vague task requires us to overcome the psychological version of static friction. There is a gentle tension in not starting. It hums in the background, asking for attention. The first small step is the best friend here. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Open the file. Put on shoes. The goal is not to finish. The goal is to create motion. Once the wheels turn, the next turn is easier. Many routines are helpful. They reduce anxiety and decision fatigue. The challenge comes when a routine no longer serves us, but remains easier than change. Even beliefs carry momentum. Once we adopt a lens for the world, new ideas pass through that glass. Information that contradicts what we already hold does not just feel unfamiliar, it feels like friction. Changing your mind is rarely about facts alone. It asks you to step off a moving walkway, to lay new tracks. That takes reflection, patience, and a willingness to sit with discomfort while the new path becomes walkable. There are gentle ways to work with mental inertia instead of fighting it. Stack a new behavior onto an old one so the brain feels a smooth handoff. Meditate for 2 minutes as the kettle settles. Do balance drills right after brushing your teeth. Lower the activation energy. If the gym feels like a mountain, begin by dressing for it. If the report looks huge, write one true sentence. Little moves thin the friction. Motion invites more motion. When you slip back, remember that inertia works in both directions. Just as starting is hard, stopping a new positive streak can be hard too. Give change time and repetition. Habits are rarely smashed, they are steered. It helps to see mental inertia as a feature, not a flaw. Your brain is conserving energy and smoothing your day. It is not sabotaging you. Your job is to guide that helpful instinct toward what you actually want. Even creativity follows this curve. Writers talk about flow. It rarely begins in full song. The first lines are awkward, then a rhythm appears. Then, thought links to thought, and the current carries you. Momentum becomes ally. The same quiet law shapes the large machines of shared life. Sometimes the world feels like clockwork, moving in one direction forever. Laws, schools, health systems, traditions, and markets all carry heavy momentum. Changing even one gear can feel like pushing a glacier with a teaspoon. That slowness is not always failure. Much of it is stability. Like the laws of motion, there are hidden forces that keep societies from shaking apart. They make sudden turns hard. They also keep things coherent enough to trust. Institutions are more than buildings and officials. They are webs of policies, expectations, and layered decisions. Like rock strata set down over time, each layer rests on the one below. Processes evolve slowly because each change must be justified, debated, recorded, and tested. The speed is often deliberate. Stability is the first goal. Institutions still change, sometimes dramatically, but rarely in an instant. Reform takes years because it must pass through channels designed to filter out unwise jolts that can be maddening in a crisis. It also prevents chaos. If every strong breeze could rewrite law, we might have more noise than progress. Economies show the same drag. Money systems, trade routes, supply chains, the habits of millions of firms and households, all are tied together. A policy that sings on paper may need years to reach the street and more years to show its true tune. When shocks arrive, like a global recession or a pandemic, the waves move through slowly but deeply. The ripples expose how much the system resists quick turns. This is not just bureaucracy, it is scale. Culture has inertia with a warmer face, greetings, shared meals, rituals, songs, stories, and the ways we teach children linger because they have kept people close. Norms do change, but mostly by steps. Dragging too fast can snap what could have been gently bent. Cultural inertia protects what should not be lost, and it can also delay badly needed updates. This is where conversation, patience, and small pilots help. Find a point of leverage, nudge it, let the whole learn a new rhythm. Across layers, from genes to habits, from families to cities, from orbits to economies, a soft sentence holds steady in the background. Things continue as they are, unless a real force touches them. Inertia is not the villain. And it is not the driver. It is the baseline rhythm. When you understand that rhythm, you learn when to add force and when to lengthen the time of a stop, so the force is gentler and the bruise smaller. You learn to place a new change right beside something familiar so the pulse does not break. That is how life has traveled so far. It is how people move forward too. A push that is small and well-timed. A correction that is repeated until it feels natural. A period of patience while new grooves settle. Tonight, that pattern is the same in body and mind and city. Evolution preserves what works until pressure writes a better line. The brain runs what it can on auto and saves power for what truly matters. Institutions shield against storms while small reforms slip in and teach the big parts how to bend. Inertia does not freeze the world. It reminds us that most lasting changes begin with a careful touch placed in the right spot, long enough to become the new way things move. When change touches millions, even billions, every small adjustment becomes intricate. Picture turning a ship the size of a continent. You don't yank the wheel. You lean gently, hold the angle, check the gauges, listen for strain. You wait to be sure the new heading holds and nothing cracks under the load. Culture adds another layer. Language, values, customs, and beliefs pass hand to hand like heirlooms. They carry family memory, comfort, and identity. They are not software patches you install overnight. People do not adopt new ideas because they are told to. Belief takes root in lived experience, in trusted voices, in the stories a community tells itself. The deeper the roots, the more care it takes to bend them. Yet roots can bend. Over years and decades, they do. You can see it in the steady arc of civil rights, in the widening doorway of education, in the long work of gender equality. None of it moved quickly. Each step met a wall, then a dialogue, then another wall. A whisper turned into a song became a march became a movement. Laws sometimes followed culture, and sometimes walked a few paces ahead to light the way. This is the other face of inertia. Once something starts, it gathers its own momentum. Resistance is strong, but not sacred. Under pressure, under persistence, under the weight of many hands, the old shape begins to give. A first spark rarely announces itself. More often, it is one voice at a town hall, one teacher changing a lesson, one nurse rewriting a checklist, one neighbor knocking on 3 doors. That is how motion begins in human rooms. Stories travel. A sentence becomes a paragraph, others repeat. A statistic becomes a face with a name. The pattern spreads to kitchens and classrooms. One day, the thing that felt fixed has shifted a fraction, and another day it has shifted again, and then suddenly everyone says, of course, as if it had always been there. History keeps a ledger of these turns. The abolition of slavery, universal suffrage, clean water, and vaccination campaigns that turned epidemics into history lessons. Conservation laws that gave forests back their breath. None arrived as a single thunderclap. Each was a long conversation, braided with protest, setbacks, hard data, policy drafts, and songs people could hum while they worked. Each lived on the patience of those who pushed when it would have been easier to sit down. Not all momentum points the way we hope. Harm has inertia too. Inequality, corruption, prejudice, these are not new. They ride along from century to century, on habit, on fear, on convenience, on the profit of a few. Even so, change remains possible. Hard, yes. Slow, often. possible, always. It helps to see that resistance to change is not always opposition. Sometimes it is confusion. Sometimes it is grief for what feels lost. Sometimes it is the human worry that the new might be colder than the old. Institutions are not stone. They are people inside schedules and budgets, bound by process and risk. Like atoms in a solid, they tend to hold position unless stirred. Stirring requires ideas with handles, leaders who listen, empathy that makes room for dignity, and time that allows trust to grow. This is why storytelling matters. A good story eases past defenses. It wraps numbers in a life you can imagine. It turns a trend line into a mother's morning, a worker's hands, a child's laugh outside a clinic that finally has medicine. Once a story enters the common room, it settles there and changes what people expect, what they tolerate, what they ask for. Education touches the same lever. It does more than transfer facts. It offers new lenses, new questions, new ways to test a claim. It helps a person picture an alternative, and imagination is often the first step of motion. Most change does not arrive with fireworks. It accrues. A curriculum drops 2 sentences that quietly broaden who is seen. A hospital standard adds a checklist that catches the error that used to slip through. A city updates a form so one more family is included by name. A company adjusts a default so the greener choice is the easy one. A product adds alt text. A building adds a ramp that looks like it belonged there all along. None of these make headlines, but together they move the center by inches. Over years, inches become blocks. There are seasons when staying still becomes the risk. A warming climate, widening gaps in wealth, institutions that don't answer the phone, then inertia turns from comfort to hazard. In those moments, the first task is not perfection, it is momentum. Governments can write new rules, businesses can redesign supply lines, scientists can translate results into plain speech. Artists can carry those truths where charts cannot. Neighborhoods can plant literal and figurative trees whose shade will fall on strangers. Each small push adds to the sum. This is the part many of us forget. Progress doesn't ask for purity. It asks for pressure that is consistent, compassionate, and persistent. Inertia is not apathy, it is mass. Mass moves when enough force points the same way. If change feels slow, if it feels stuck, remember that much of it happens out of sight. The quiet meeting might become next year's policy. This decade's cardboard signs might teach the next decade's textbooks. The hours spent organizing, writing, listening, and showing up accumulate. Once the sum passes a threshold, movement becomes easier. The system begins to coast in a better direction. Physics has a name for the moment a balance breaks. Net force. The pushes and pulls don't cancel anymore. Something tips. That is what lifts a rocket, turns a tide, rotates a stubborn gear, brings a person out of a warm bed on a cold morning. Net force exists in engines and in choices, in parliaments and in a kitchen at 2 a.m. when someone decides to stop doing what hurts. It is the same sentence dressed for different rooms. See it in the literal. A heavy vehicle waits on a pad, gravity steady on every bolt, pumps spin, chambers pressurize, flames bite the air. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Thrust and weight are twins. Then, thrust grows larger. The remainder, the net points upward. The body lifts. Slowly, then faster. The craft leaves the ground not by wishing, but by adding enough push in the right direction for long enough. In daily life, the shape repeats. You can own a goal, a plan, a calendar app, a perfect pen. If the sum of effort and support does not outweigh fear, habit, and friction, nothing moves. It is not incapacity, it is balance. Tip the balance deadline. Friend, coach, new framing, smaller, first step, and motion begins. Society's answer to the same arithmetic. One voice matters, and many voices together matter more. Votes, policy drafts, boycotts, songs, op-eds, films, mutual aid, court cases, each is a vector. Add enough in the same direction, and the net grows unignorable. The civil rights movement did not move a nation with one speech. It moved with years of marches, sit-ins, suits filed and won, pulpits and porches, sorrow and courage. The environmental movement gathered lab reports, satellite images, teenagers on a Friday with cardboard, engineers with new designs, investors with different questions. The net grew until boards and cabinets and mayors could feel it under their feet. Force does not need to be explosive. Often, it is quiet and repeated, a phrase that becomes the new normal, a policy pilot that becomes standard, a familiar face who keeps showing up until a room begins to notice. In relationships, the principle is tender. Readiness alone does not change a pattern. There must be a reason that outweighs comfort. Love deepened, pain named, a boundary finally honored. The mind reflects the same rule. Neural pathways strengthen with use. A reaction practiced 100 times will rise before a thought catches it. To change that, you give countless, small inputs in a new direction, over and over, until the fresh trail is a path, and the path is easier than the old one. There is a helpful image from behavioral science. Activation energy. Beginnings cost more. Like a rocket leaving the pad, the first few inches ask for the most. After that, momentum assists you. What once felt like a mountain becomes a hill, then a habit. The net force required drops because inertia switches sides. The same mind that clung to the old now prefers the new. This is why encouragement matters. The text from a friend, the promise you made out loud, the chair pulled up next to you while you work. Small kindnesses can be the missing Newton of push. Resistance is part of the equation. The world pushes back. Routines pull you sideways. People unsettled by your growth may try to stall you at the doorway. Balance that with longer timelines, with allies, with rests taken on purpose. If your sum stays larger than the resistance, you accelerate. Not necessarily fast or far in a day, but steadily enough to wake one morning and realize you live in a different pattern. In physics terms, acceleration is change in velocity. In human terms, it is the feeling that effort is multiplying. One day leads to two. One voice invites a choir. One adjusted morning becomes a season that fits you better. The same logic scales to cities and nations. A transit system doesn't transform with a single vote. It changes a route, synchronizes lights, adds a bus lane, paints a bike strip that connects two broken ends, pilots off-peak fares, listens to riders, and repeats. Each small piece adds force in the same direction. After a while, what once felt immovable becomes the new default. School systems adjust reading lists, add counselors, change start times, feed more children breakfast, train teachers in practices that help a wider circle of students feel seen. Each quiet change shifts the sum. There is also wisdom in knowing when to lengthen time instead of increasing force. In collisions, The same change in momentum spread over more seconds means a softer impact. In policy, phased rollouts, sunset clauses, and pilot programs can make a hard turn gentler for those who feared the wheel. In personal change, starting ridiculously small, a paragraph, a walk to the mailbox stretches the stop and start into a glide. The math is the same, the feeling is kinder. Hope does not have to be naive. It can be as practical as a diagram on a chalkboard. Inertia is the context in which all change happens. It tells you that big things resist and small things add up. It tells you where to place your hand, how long to hold the pressure, and which allies will turn a whisper into a push. When enough people pull in the same direction, even the largest structures begin to lean. Maybe not quickly, maybe not easily, but lean they do. Sometimes, a tiny nudge is all you need. One phone call, one honest sentence, one seed planted in tired dirt. Other times, a long-built inertia asks for a larger answer, a coalition, a budget, a vote, a redesign that stops the old motion and starts a new one. The name, in any case, is the same. Net force. Add vectors that align. Remove ones that cancel. Let momentum do what it does once you are moving. Keep the image close. A massive ship does not pirouette, it arcs. A culture does not flip, it bends. A life does not reinvent itself in an afternoon. It accumulates different mornings. In every case, the rule is faithful. Things continue as they are until a real reason arrives. Provide the reason, hold the line, and give it time to take. When the balance tips, motion feels different. It feels like the world finally meeting you halfway. A little extra weight on one side, a tug in a new direction, just enough to make the old path wobble and the new one begin. Launching a rocket, changing a career, confronting a stubborn system, getting out of bed before the third snooze, all of it returns to the same quiet arithmetic. What holds you in place and what moves you forward. No matter how massive the object or how deep the groove, the rule keeps its promise. When the net force stops canceling, the line bends. Apply enough net force and you will change direction. It is not a question of if, it is a question of when and how gently or firmly you are willing to push. There is something almost tender in a universe that prefers to coast, a cosmos where motion, once begun, continues without complaint. A planet will spin for ages unless something interrupts. A lonely rock in deep space can travel for billions of years, untroubled and unchanged, not because it is lazy, but because nothing has asked it to do otherwise. Inertia is not a law that barks. It is a promise that whispers. Push, and a thing moves. Stop pushing, and it keeps going. Set it down, and it rests. Change asks for effort. Without a request, nothing fusses. That quiet preference meets a second companion, entropy. People often call it disorder, but it is better to think of it as the way energy spreads. Heat flows from hot to cold. Coffee cools. Toast burns. A carefully stacked desk relaxes into a soft confusion of papers and pens. Left alone, systems drift toward equilibrium. Edges round off. Contrasts fade. The universe tends toward balance, not toward tidy arrangements. It does not dislike order. It simply will not maintain it without a steady input of care. Together, inertia and entropy sketch a world that drifts rather than drives. Motion is preserved. Structure loosens unless something sustains it. Think of walking into an old house that has not been tended for years. The walls still stand, the chairs are still chairs, but dust gathers, hinges stiffen, floorboards complain, not because a vandal arrived, but because nothing kept the tide at bay. Yet the same universe that leans toward quiet is also loud, with stars and rivers and storms. Galaxies collide, black holes spin, cells divide, canyons deepen grain by grain. How can the still and the wild belong to the same room? It helps to recall that motion is not the problem. The universe is not reluctant to move. It simply refuses to change its mind without a cause. Once set in motion, it is happy to continue. That is why the story is so dynamic. There was a beginning. About 13.8 billion years ago, the universe did not explode into space. Space itself began to expand. The first light rushed. The first particles danced. Gravity and fields and the seeds of structure arrived. From that early surge came everything familiar: matter, radiation, galaxies that spun themselves into spirals, stars that ignited and failed and left heavy elements behind, planets that cooled and turned. The initial motion did not fade. It stretched, it calmed, it kept going. We live inside its echo. This patience appears everywhere once you learn to see it, in the shallow arc of a falling leaf that keeps curving because air offers a steady hand, in the long path of a comet that speeds up near the sun, swings through, and glides back into cold, in the way a thought, once shaped, returns tomorrow by the same doorway it used today. Things continue until friction, resistance, or decay speaks up. The lesson is simple, and it is deep. History matters. What happened a moment ago decides what happens next. If you like, you can think of inertia as a kind of memory, not the conscious kind, but the way a body remembers a push. The present is indebted to the past. Newton placed that debt in his laws. Einstein folded it into space-time so that straight lines become curves in the presence of mass. Quantum fields add their own rhythms, yet even there continuity survives. Nothing vanishes without reason. Nothing swerves without cause. The present flows from the past like ink from a pen. Inertia is the current carrying it forward. Life fits this picture with a beautiful stubbornness. Organisms are local exceptions to the general drift. They keep their inner order by spending energy. Cells pump, repair, copy, and sort. We are temporary eddies in a wider river, pockets where entropy is held back for a time by a steady flow of sunlight and food. Stop the flow, and the eddy loosens. That is not tragedy. It is the quiet baseline. Yet while we endure, we resist. We build cities, invent languages, make songs and mathematics, teach children to tie laces and sailors to plot arcs on charts. Each act is a small force against the easy slide. Each idea is a nudge. Perhaps that is why consciousness feels so powerful. It does not only react to motion, it chooses directions. Inertia then becomes more than a property of objects. It is a metaphor for habits and cultures and hopes. Why routines endure, why beliefs hold their shape until stories soften them, why change feels significant when it arrives. It breaks a flow. It interrupts a silence, and it still obeys the rules. If a life changes direction, there was a force, a deadline, a conversation, a kindness, a loss, a decision that stopped balancing both sides of the scale and finally tipped it. Seen this way, the universe is not lazy, it is dependable. If speed or direction changed at random, atoms would not hold together, stars would not last, and minds could not make sense of anything. Inertia keeps the stage from collapsing while the actors improvise. Within that safety, there is room for play. Inertia gives us something to rest in and something to push against. It resists change, but it does not forbid it. In the tension between stillness and motion, between entropy and structure, between old roots and new ones, we find the room to try. So we listen for places where a small push matters, a satellite that needs a brief burn to slide into a better lane, a keyboard that waits for one honest sentence to begin a long chapter, a community garden that asks for 2 afternoons of hands to become a habit of care, a policy that needs a pilot in one school before it becomes a standard in many. The same map applies. Add reasons that align, remove frictions that cancel, spread the stop over more seconds so the impact is softer. Let momentum help once it arrives. If you look closely, nothing is ever truly still. A seed asleep under snow is still moving through time. A stone in sunlight is turning with the planet and swinging with the planet around a star. A city at night is full of tiny adjustments, people choosing one small kindness over one small indifference. Stillness hides motion, and motion hides stillness. A falling apple and a trailing meteor obey the same lines. A revolution and a raindrop both begin with a force. What, then, do we do with this knowledge? Perhaps we borrow its gentleness. We build change the way the world prefers to move, with patience, with small, repeated nudges, with enough rest that the bruise is small and the balance holds. Press where it matters. Hold long enough to tip. Notice when the net force finally turns non-zero. Then trust inertia to help. Once you begin a better habit, the same law that held you still will keep you going. Once a culture bends toward care, the same weight that resisted the first steps will help carry the next ones. There is poetry in that. The rule that keeps a planet in orbit is the rule that keeps a promise alive when the day is long. The law that lets a probe coast between worlds is the law that lets a person in a quiet apartment find a rhythm that heals. Change does not need to be sudden to be real. It needs to be real enough to continue on its own. So here we are, back at the soft edge of things. Maybe you are listening in a living room with the lights low. Maybe a window is open to a few night sounds. Maybe dawn is near and the sky is thinking about turning gray. Wherever you are already participating in the law we have been talking about. Your breath keeps a pace. Your thoughts follow paths they have learned and sometimes discover a new turn. The earth under you spins faster than a jet can fly and yet feels perfectly still. The stars appear unchanging while every one of them is moving. If this journey brought you a little ease or a pinch of wonder, you can tap like or subscribe when it feels natural. It helps this small, quiet project keep its own steady motion, one calm voice at a time. And if all you want is rest, that is welcome too. Rest is allowed here. Rest is part of the rule. Close your eyes. If that feels good, let your jaw soften. Feel the weight of the blanket like a gentle hand. The world will keep its promises while you sleep. The moon will cross the sky. Oceans will turn. Far above, a satellite will glide over rooftops, unhurried, certain. Somewhere, a comet is rounding a corner and heading back into dark. Somewhere a child is learning to ride a bicycle and will not need your hand tomorrow. Everything is moving exactly as it should until a kind reason asks it to change. And now let the words get lighter, like dust in a sunbeam. Let your breath be the metronome. The room settles. The day loosens its grip. Outside, a few last sounds grow small. Stars keep their pace far overhead. The mind drifts the way a leaf drifts on a slow river. Motion continues. Effort fades. Sleep draws near, patient and warm, and the universe hums its steady lullaby as you drift and drift and drift.